Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. This is my final opportunity to explain to you the heroic efforts of Mr. Officer Waldman. Officer Waldman today told you about how he had to make a split-second decision on what to do when his partner, Officer Levy, was being attacked by today's plaintiff. He was being attacked at knife point and had already been stabbed once. These are the circumstances that Officer Waldman faced when he made that split-second decision to shoot the plaintiff today. Or rather, today's plaintiff shot a few years ago. The attorney for the plaintiff explained a little bit about the burden of proof and what they have to prove today. And he is absolutely right. He is right 100% that it is his job as the attorney for the plaintiff to prove to you today each element of the action, each element proving that Mr. Waldman acted negligently, acted willfully and wantedly in firing that shot. As I told you at the beginning of today's trial, the question today is not whether Mr. Waldman was acting negligently or using excessive force. The question today is, what are you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, going to say to an officer, a hero, who had to make a split-second decision to save his partner's life? You heard today from Officer Waldman and his partner, Officer Levy, that Mr. Ramirez, the plaintiff today, was armed with a knife. That when he got out of his car at the beginning of the altercation, he was yelling. He was obviously upset. That as soon as he got within arm's length of Officer Levy, he started throwing punches. He pulled the knife and started to stab Officer Levy. This is the situation that Officer Waldman faced. Officer Waldman testified that it was a very split-second decision. He didn't have time to think about, if I pull the trigger, will the bullet stop the assailant and also possibly hit my partner? He didn't have that time. In that split second, when he saw the knife go up for the second time and was about to come down on his partner, he had to make a choice. And thankfully, I think he made the right choice. He fired the shot that protected his partner. You heard testimony from doctors today. You heard the doctor for the plaintiff say that, well, because of the nature of the wound, it looked like Mr. Ramirez was moving at the time, and that the bullet came at a downward angle. But he also admitted that he had no way of telling what direction Mr. Ramirez was moving. He also admitted that it was just as likely that Mr. Ramirez was standing up, leaning back, and moving his arm like this, as it was that he was laying on the ground trying to get up, as he claims. What's interesting about the testimony from the doctor for the plaintiff compared with the doctor for my clients today, is that the doctor for the plaintiffs has experience in a lot of different areas of pathology. He has experience in morbid pathology, doing autopsies. He has experience in pathology working with diseases, and he also said that he had experience in forensic pathology. Most of the time, he spends his time teaching as a professor, and sometimes he does some consultations. He may know a lot about pathology, but the doctor that testified for the defendant today has much more experience in the area of forensic pathology. Exactly what we're talking about here today. Where did the bullet come from? What happened once it hit the body? And the doctor today, for the defendants rather, testified that most likely Mr. Ramirez was standing up at the time, very consistent with the testimony of Officer Waldman and Officer Levy, that he was standing up when he was shot. Also, there was a knife present. Now, the plaintiffs have tried to discount the fact that there was a knife on the scene by saying, oh, well, there weren't any fingerprints. There wasn't any blood. I can't account, I don't know, I wasn't there that day. I don't know how Mr. Ramirez was holding the knife. He may have been holding it in a way that his fingers didn't get on it. Somehow, there were no fingerprints. The knife had to go through at least 2 layers of clothing when it hit Mr. Levy. It went through his jacket and his shirt before it struck him on the shoulder. And it didn't even go that deep. So it's very understandable why the blood was off the blade of the knife. But remember, this knife was found on the scene. This knife was found right next to Mr. Ramirez. This is the knife that Mr. Ramirez used to stab Officer Levy before he got shot. Thank you.